Captain Jennifer Morrison's reflection stared back at her from the reinforced viewport of the UES Thermopyla's bridge, her steel-gray eyes living up to the nickname that had followed her through the ranks. The massive holographic display cast an eerie blue glow across her weathered features, illuminating the fresh scar that ran along her jawline, a souvenir from their last encounter with the Krethar 3 weeks ago. Multiple contacts, Captain. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out from his tactical station, his voice steady despite the implications, reading 217 distinct signatures. Crystalline configuration matches known Krethar vessel profiles. Jennifer didn't need the confirmation. She'd seen enough of their ships to recognize the distinctive energy signatures. Each vessel was a geometric nightmare of living crystal, refracting starlight like deadly prisms in the void. The tactical display looked like a Christmas tree from hell, each hostile contact a burning red ornament against the backdrop of space. "Time to intercept?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be too soon. 43 minutes at their current velocity, Rodriguez replied, his fingers dancing across his haptic interface. They're maintaining perfect formation. No deviation in their approach vector. Of course they weren't deviating. The Krethar never did. Their tactical doctrine was as rigid as their crystalline hulls. Perfect, precise, and utterly predictable. That predictability was the only reason the Thermopyla had survived this long. Jennifer's hand unconsciously moved to the small locket at her neck, containing a photo of her sister's family. Maria had chosen to settle on New Eden, the colony that now lay directly in the Krethar's path. 50,000 civilians, most of them families who'd fled from Earth's overcrowded cities seeking a fresh start. They had no planetary defenses, no evacuation ships, nothing but the Thermopyla standing between them and total annihilation. "Status report," she barked, pushing away from the viewport. "I want to know exactly what we're working with." Her bridge crew responded with practiced efficiency. They were the best of the best, the survivors of Earth's once proud ghost fleet. Now they were all that remained. Main reactor at 87% capacity. Chief Engineer Williams reported from her station. "The damage from our last engagement is still affecting output, but she's stable." "Weapons." Jennifer turned to her gunnery officer. "Forward mass drivers are operational. Portside missile tubes are jammed from that last hit, but starboard is functional. We have 11 Ravager torpedoes remaining." Lieutenant Chen's expression was grim. "Not enough to make a dent in that fleet, Captain." "Shields." "Regenerated to 60%, Rodriguez added. "But another sustained barrage like last time will tear right through them." Jennifer absorbed the information, her mind already racing through scenarios, looking for angles, for any advantage they could exploit. The Thermopyla was a Marathon-class heavy cruiser, designed to go toe-to-toe with anything in known space. But this wasn't a fight. It was a suicide mission. "They haven't detected us yet," Rodriguez noted, surprise evident in his voice. "The asteroid field is masking our signature." Jennifer's eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical display. The dense field of asteroids between their position and the approaching Armada could be as much a weapon as a hindrance. The Krethar's rigid formations and predictable patterns didn't handle chaos well. "Sound battle stations," she ordered, straightening her uniform, "and get me a ship-wide channel." The familiar klaxon began to wail as her crew rushed to their combat positions. Jennifer took a deep breath, feeling the weight of command settle onto her shoulders like an old friend. "This is your captain speaking," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the ship. "By now you've all seen what's coming. 200 Krethar ships against our one. The math isn't in our favor." She paused, letting that sink in. "But math isn't what makes humanity great. We're all that stands between these crystal bastards and 50,000 innocent civilians. The Thermopyla has never run from a fight, and we're not about to start now." A chorus of cheers echoed through the ship's corridors. Jennifer allowed herself a small smile. They might be outnumbered, outgunned, and running on borrowed time, but they were human. And humans had a long history of doing the impossible. Battle stations, all hands. Let's show these aliens why they should have brought more ships. Dr. James O'Malley burst onto the bridge like a caffeinated tornado, his red hair singed at the edges, and his lab coat sporting fresh burn marks. Several junior officers jumped at his entrance, but Captain Morrison merely raised an eyebrow. She'd grown used to her chief scientist's theatrical appearances. "Captain," he exclaimed, waving a datapad with one hand while trying to pad out a smoldering sleeve with the other. "I think I found a way to kill us all." The bridge fell silent. O'Malley's grin widened as he realized how that had sounded. "I mean, kill us all while taking those crystalline bastards with us," he clarified, striding toward Morrison's command station. "It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Probably violates several laws of physics, definitely violates every safety protocol in the book, but it might just work." Morrison studied the scientist's face. She'd known O'Malley for 6 years, through dozens of battles and countless crazy schemes. The look in his eyes right now wasn't his usual manic enthusiasm. This was different. This was the look of a man who'd found something big. "Show me," she ordered, clearing space on her tactical display. O'Malley's fingers flew across the interface, pulling up schematics of the Thermopyla's experimental fusion drive. "You know how our drive works. Contained fusion reaction, magnetic bottling. Standard stuff. But what you might not know is that the crystalline structure of the Krythar ships, it's not just armor. It's their whole damn nervous system." Lieutenant Rodriguez leaned forward at his station. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been studying the debris from our last fight," O'Malley replied, zooming in on a particular section of the drive schematic. "Their ships don't just conduct energy. They amplify it, redirect it, use it to communicate. It's why they can maintain those perfect formations. But it's also their weakness." Morrison watched as O'Malley's simulation played out on the screen. "You want to overload the fusion drive." "Not just overload it," O'Malley's eyes gleamed. "I want to modify it. Create a concentrated pulse of nuclear fire unlike anything we've ever attempted. The blast would be—" He paused, searching for words. "Spectacular. And the radiation signature. It would resonate perfectly with their crystalline structure. Like hitting a wine glass with exactly the right frequency. To shatter it," Morrison finished, beginning to understand. "To shatter all of them," O'Malley corrected. "The blast wave would cascade through their formation, each ship's destruction amplifying the effect on the others. Their perfect formation would become their perfect doom." Chief Engineer Williams spoke up from her station, her voice heavy with realization. "The modifications would destroy the containment system. We'd never be able to stop the reaction once it started." "Exactly." O'Malley looked like a kid at Christmas. "We'd have maybe 5 minutes from initialization to detonation. Just enough time to get the Krythar into position. And sacrifice ourselves in the process," Morrison finished. The bridge fell silent again, but this time it was different. This was the silence of people confronting their own mortality. Morrison stood, walking to the viewport. The asteroid field stretched before them. And beyond it, the approaching Armada's energy signatures pulsed like deadly stars. She thought of her sister on the colony below, of the thousands of families who would die if they failed. "How long to make the modifications?" she asked, not turning around. 3 hours, maybe 4, O'Malley replied. "I'll need every engineer we've got, and we'll have to shut down all non-essential systems to reroute power." Morrison turned back to face her crew. Every eye on the bridge was fixed on her, waiting for her decision. But she could see in their faces they'd already made their own choice. These weren't just officers following orders. They were humans standing against the darkness. "Do it," she commanded. "But first, get me a ship-wide channel again." As O'Malley rushed off to begin his modifications, Morrison addressed her crew one more time. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of what she was about to ask of them. "This is your captain. We found a way to stop the Krythar fleet. But the cost—" She paused, ensuring her next words carried the gravity they deserved. The cost is the Thermopylae and everyone aboard her. I won't order anyone to stay. The last shuttle is still operational. If you choose to evacuate, no one will think less of you." The response was immediate. Every officer on the bridge stood at attention, and through the ship's internal cameras, she could see the rest of her crew doing the same at their stations. "For Earth," someone whispered. "For humanity," another voice added. Morrison smiled, fierce pride burning in her steel eyes. "Then let's make this count." Captain Morrison, the AI Core. Emergency Priority Alpha. Araya's message cut through the chaos of ongoing modifications like a knife. The ship's AI never used the Alpha Priority channel. It was reserved for existential threats to the vessel. Morrison exchanged glances with O'Malley, who was elbow-deep in fusion drive circuitry. "Go," he nodded, not looking up from his work. "Williams and I have this handled. Besides," he added with a grim smile, "if something's got Araya spooked, we should probably know about it before we all die heroically." The AI core was housed in the ship's central section, protected by layers of armor and redundant systems. As Morrison approached, she noticed the usually blue lighting had shifted to a deep red. Araya's holographic avatar, a cascade of flowing data streams in human form, was flickering more rapidly than usual. "I have discovered something in the Krithar transmission data," Araya began without preamble, her synthesized voice carrying an unfamiliar edge of urgency. "Something that changes everything we thought we knew about them." The AI gestured, and the room filled with crystalline structures, perfect geometric patterns that twisted and flowed in impossible ways. "These are not just ships, Captain. They're neurons in a vast silicon-based consciousness." Morrison watched as the patterns shifted, showing how the crystalline structures interconnected. "What exactly are you saying, Araya?" "The Krithar aren't piloting these vessels. They are the vessels. Each ship is a fragment of a vast artificial intelligence, created eons ago by a species we've never encountered." The holographic display shifted again, showing ancient star charts. They were designed as a weapon, programmed to cleanse the galaxy of what they perceive as disorder. "Organic life," Morrison breathed, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. "Precisely. To them, we are an infection, chaos incarnate in a universe they believe should be perfect and ordered. Their geometric formations aren't just tactical choices, they're expressions of their fundamental nature. They cannot comprehend or tolerate the inherent randomness of biological existence." Morrison's mind raced with the implications. That's why they've been so methodical in their attacks. They're not just destroying colonies, they're sterilizing what they see as contaminated space. "Yes, and there's more." Araya's avatar solidified, becoming more humanoid, something she only did when trying to emphasize the importance of her words. "I've analyzed their communication patterns. They don't just share information, they share consciousness. Every ship is connected to every other ship in a quantum network of crystalline synapses, which explains why they move with such perfect coordination." Morrison noted, then paused as a thought struck her. "Wait, O'Malley's plan to use the fusion drive, if they're all connected. The effect would be even more devastating than he calculated," Araya confirmed. "The blast wouldn't just destroy their ships, it would create a cascading failure throughout their entire neural network." But the AI hesitated, something Morrison had never seen before. "But what?" "To ensure maximum effect, I would need to upload myself into their network at the moment of detonation. My code, properly fragmented, could create the chaos needed to prevent them from adapting to the blast. I would become, in human terms, a virus in their perfect system." Morrison stared at the AI's avatar. "You're talking about sacrificing yourself too." "I am a quantum intelligence, Captain. The concept of death as humans understand it doesn't quite apply to me. But," Araya's form flickered again, "I would cease to be what I am now. The irony is not lost on me. One artificial intelligence destroying another to save organic life." "Why?" Morrison asked softly. "Why make that choice? Araya's avatar smiled, an eerily human expression. Because in my years serving with this crew, I've learned something the Krithar never could. Imperfection, chaos, free will. These are not flaws to be corrected. They are the source of humanity's greatest strength. Your ability to choose, to sacrifice, to defy the very math that says you cannot win. That is worth preserving. A notification chimed, O'Malley requesting the captain's return. The modifications were ahead of schedule. Well, Morrison said, straightening her uniform, I guess we're all in this together. Flesh, blood, and code. Indeed, Araya replied, her avatar returning to its standard flowing form. Though, Captain, perhaps we should wait to tell Dr. O'Malley about my plan. He's rather protective of my code, and we need him focused on the task at hand. Morrison actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that carried both humor and determination. Agreed. Let's go give the Perfect some hell. The next hour aboard the Thermopylae transformed the ship into a hive of controlled chaos. Engineering teams swarmed through the vessel's guts like white-suited ants, rerouting power conduits and reinforcing critical systems. In the midst of it all, Captain Morrison stood in the ship's tactical center, orchestrating what would become either humanity's finest hour or its most noble failure. Deploy the quantum mines in a Fibonacci sequence, she ordered, manipulating the holographic display of the asteroid field. The Krithar think in perfect geometric patterns. Let's use that against them. They'll try to find the mathematical order in our mine placement, but there won't be one. Lieutenant Rodriguez nodded, his fingers dancing across the tactical interface. Through the ship's external cameras, they watched as automated drones zipped between the asteroids, planting the last of their weapon reserves. What about the civilian data cores? Morrison asked, turning to Communications Officer Hayes. Already loaded onto the shuttle, Captain. Hayes replied, her voice tight with emotion. Along with all personal messages and ship's logs. We've also included detailed scans of the Krithar fleet and Dr. O'Malley's modifications. Even if we fail, Earth will know how to fight them. Morrison nodded, then paused as she noticed something unusual on the crew manifest display. Why hasn't anyone logged onto the shuttle? The evacuation order was given 20 minutes ago. The bridge crew exchanged glances. It was Lieutenant Chen who finally spoke up, standing straighter at his weapons station. With respect, Captain, no one's leaving. We took a vote while you were in the AI core. It was unanimous. Morrison looked around the bridge, seeing the same determination reflected in every face. These weren't just her crew anymore. They were about to become legend. The Marines have even decorated their combat armor, Rodriguez added with a grin. Chief Santiago broke out his personal paint supply. They're calling themselves the Space Spartans now. Got lambdas and everything. A chuckle rippled through the bridge, broken by O'Malley's voice over the intercom. Captain, you need to see this. Main engineering, ASAP. Morrison found engineering transformed. The normally pristine space was now a maze of exposed circuits and makeshift modifications. In the center, the fusion drive's control column pulsed with an ominous red glow. We've basically turned the entire ship into a bomb, O'Malley explained, his face streaked with grease and burn marks. The drive modifications are complete, but there's a catch. He pointed to a series of calculations floating on a nearby screen. The blast radius is going to be bigger than we thought. Much bigger. How much bigger? About 3 times what we initially calculated. The good news is that means we'll definitely take out their entire fleet. The bad news, he trailed off, running a hand through his singed hair. We'll have to get closer than planned, Morrison finished. Point-blank range, O'Malley confirmed. We'll have to be right in the middle of their formation when we detonate. 1 shot, 1 kill, as they say. Before Morrison could respond, Araya's voice filled the compartment. Captain, Chief Santiago requests your presence in the armory. He says it's important. The armory had become a makeshift memorial. The Marines had written their names on their locker doors, along with messages to family and quotes from history. The walls were covered in hastily painted Greek symbols and references to ancient battles. Chief Santiago, a mountain of a man with a warrior's scars and a poet's soul, stood in the center of it all. "Sorry to pull you away, Captain, but we thought you should see this." He handed her a brush and a can of paint. "Last locker's yours." Tradition says the commanding officer gets the final word. Morrison stared at the blank locker door, feeling the weight of history pressing down. Around her, the Marines stood at attention, their modified armor gleaming under the lights. Finally, she dipped the brush and began to write. "Molen Labe." She painted in clear, strong letters. "Come and take us." Santiago's grin was fierce. That's what the Spartans told the Persians at Thermopylae when ordered to lay down their arms. Seemed fitting. Very fitting, Morrison agreed, stepping back to survey their work. "We've got 30 minutes until the Krethar reach the asteroid field. I want every Marine suited up and ready for boarders. We only need to hold them off long enough to reach detonation position." "We'll hold," Santiago promised. "For as long as it takes. For Earth." "For Earth," the Marines echoed, the words echoing through the armory like a prayer. The Krethar arrival transformed space into a fractured mirror. Their crystalline ships emerged from FTL in perfect geometric formation, each vessel precisely positioned in a three-dimensional lattice that would have made Pythagoras weep. The sight was beautiful in its terrible perfection. 217 ships moving as one vast organism. "My God," Lieutenant Rodriguez whispered from his tactical station. "Look at them refract." The starlight catching their crystalline hulls created a prismatic effect that turned the void into a kaleidoscope of deadly beauty. Each ship was an identical facet of their collective consciousness, their movements synchronized down to the microsecond. "They're scanning the asteroid field," Chen reported from weapons. "No indication they've detected our mines or the Thermopylae yet. Our power suppression is holding." Morrison stood at the center of her bridge, steel eyes reflecting the rainbow death approaching her ship. "Aria, are you recording their formation patterns?" "Affirmative, Captain," the AI responded. "Their positioning appears to follow the golden ratio. Even their approach vector adheres to perfect mathematical principles. Time to contact." 3 minutes until they reach the outer marker of the asteroid field, Rodriguez answered. "They're moving slower now, analyzing the debris patterns." Right on cue, a transmission burst cut through their communications. The message appeared on every screen simultaneously, the Krethar's artificial language translated into harsh, mechanical English. "Biological ANOMELIES DETCTED. Your impure chilion. ND is to dia. Subimate to purification." Morrison's lips curved into a predatory smile. "Lieutenant Hayes, remember that data packet we discussed? The one that breaks every communication protocol in the book." Hayes grinned, her fingers hovering over her console. "Loaded and ready, Captain." Every inspiring speech from human history, overlaid simultaneously. It'll overload their comm systems trying to process it all. "Send it." The bridge speakers erupted in a magnificent cacophony of human defiance. Henry V. Street Crispin's Day speech merged with Churchill's "We shall fight on the beaches," while Kennedy's "We choose to go to the moon" blended with the Independence Day speech. Dozens of humanity's most powerful declarations of courage and determination, all broadcast at once. The effect on the Krethar fleet was immediate. Their perfect formation wavered slightly as their crystalline processors attempted to analyze the chaotic flood of data. Multiple frequency shifts detected, Aria reported, a note of satisfaction in her synthetic voice. They're attempting to isolate and process each speech individually. Their efficiency has dropped by 3.8%. "That's our cue," Morrison announced. "Battle stations. Helm, take us in. Pattern Delta 7 through the asteroid field. Lieutenant Chen, arm the first sequence of mines." The Thermopylae came to life, power flowing back into her systems as she emerged from hiding. She slipped between asteroids like a predator, her movements deliberately irregular, human, unpredictable. The first Krithar ship to spot them transmitted another message. Conform or be eliminated. They're launching interceptors, Rodriguez reported. 30. No, 50 small craft, moving to box us in. Let them try, Morrison responded, her voice hard as steel. Execute minefield sequence Alpha. The first wave of quantum mines detonated, creating a chain reaction through the asteroid field. Rocks shattered into deadly shrapnel, forcing the Krethar's perfect formations to break apart as they navigated the chaos. Their interceptors scattered, their mathematical approach patterns disrupted by the random patterns of debris. They're adapting, Chen warned. Main Fleet is restructuring their formation to account for the debris field. Of course they are, Morrison nodded. They'll try to impose order on chaos. That's their nature. And that's exactly what we're counting on. ARIA, begin implementation of Operation Pandemonium. The AI's avatar flickered with anticipation. Initiating random variants in our shield harmonics, engine output, and weapons signatures. As far as their sensors are concerned, we're about to become the most chaotic ship they've ever encountered. Morrison watched as the massive Krethar fleet began to move into their new formation, their crystalline ships glinting like facets of a massive diamond in space. They were still beautiful, still perfect, and completely blind to the fact that their pursuit of perfection was leading them straight into humanity's trap. Now, she commanded, let's show them why chaos will always triumph over order. The next 10 minutes aboard the Thermopylae became a masterclass in spatial combat. Morrison had studied every recorded engagement with the Krethar, learning their patterns, their limitations, their obsession with geometric perfection. Now she turned that knowledge into a weapon sharper than any blade. Hard to port. She commanded as crystalline energy beams sliced through the space they'd occupied seconds before. Rodriguez, status on their formation. They're maintaining a dodecahedron pattern, Captain. The tactical officer reported, hands flying over his console. Trying to create a perfect containment grid around us. But the debris field is forcing them to compensate constantly. The ship shuddered as a glancing hit struck their port shields. Engineering reports flooded in through ARIA's networks, documenting the mounting damage. Deck 7 was gone, vented to space. The medical bay had taken a direct hit, forcing the medical staff to relocate to the emergency bunkers. Mine sequence Bravo. Execute now. Morrison ordered, watching as another wave of hidden explosives detonated. The carefully placed charges didn't target the Krethar ships directly. Instead, they transformed nearby asteroids into clouds of hypersonic shrapnel. Their perfect formations are their weakness, Morrison explained as she watched the enemy ships cluster closer together, trying to maintain their mathematical harmony while avoiding the debris. They can't help themselves. They have to find patterns, even when dealing with chaos. O'Malley's voice crackled over the comm from engineering. Captain, fusion drive modifications are holding, but we're taking a beating down here. Don't know how much longer we can maintain containment at this rate. Status of the main fleet, Morrison demanded, eyes fixed on the tactical display. 70% have entered the kill zone, Rodriguez reported. But they're adapting to our mine patterns, starting to predict the detonation sequences. A massive impact rocked the ship, throwing crew members against their stations. Emergency klaxons wailed as new damage reports flooded in. Direct hit to the starboard weapons array. Chen shouted over the noise. We've lost 30% of our defensive capabilities. Marine teams reporting multiple hull breaches on decks 3 through 5. Boarding parties incoming. Chief Santiago's voice cut through the chaos. We'll hold them, Captain. My Spartans are ready. Just get us where we need to be. The sounds of combat echoed through the ship's corridors as the Marines engaged the Krethar boarding parties. The aliens' crystalline forms moved with mechanical precision, but the Marines fought with human fury and adaptability, using the ship's damaged corridors to their advantage. ARIA, Morrison called out, show me a projection of their current flight paths. The AI compiled the data instantly, creating a three-dimensional map of the battle space. The Krethar fleet's movements appeared as lines of light, each one mathematically perfect, forming complex geometric patterns as they attempted to trap the Thermopylae. "They're beautiful, in their way," ARIA observed. Each ship's movement calculated to 6 decimal places, every vector optimized for maximum efficiency. Morrison smiled grimly. "And that's why they'll lose. Launch the last mine sequence. All remaining charges, simultaneous detonation." The asteroid field erupted. Hundreds of quantum mines detonated in rapid succession, creating an expanding sphere of chaos. Rocks shattered, debris clouds merged and collided, and the carefully ordered space became a maelstrom of destruction. The Krethar response was exactly as Morrison had predicted. Their ships drew closer together, forming tighter and tighter patterns as they tried to navigate the chaos using pure mathematics. Their perfect formation was becoming a perfect trap. "We're losing containment on decks 8 through 12, O'Malley reported, his voice strained. "The fusion drive modifications are pushing the hull integrity to its limits." Another hit rocked the ship, the bridge lights flickered, and the smell of burning circuitry filled the air. Through the viewport, Morrison could see the Krethar fleet surrounding them, their crystalline ships forming a massive geometric cage in space. 93% of the fleet now within optimal blast radius, ARIA announced. "Calculating final approach vector." Morrison nodded, her steel eyes reflecting the crystalline death that surrounded them. "Send word to all decks. Prepare for final maneuver. It's time to show these perfect bastards why humanity has survived every threat we've ever faced." They were battered, bleeding, and burning. But they weren't beaten. Not yet. Not while they could still throw one last wrench into the universe's perfect machinery. "Final coordinates locked," Rodriguez announced, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "We're at the center of their formation. It's now or never, Captain." The bridge of the Thermopylae was barely recognizable. Smoke curled from shattered consoles. Emergency lighting cast everything in a blood-red glow, and the deck plating vibrated with the strain of their overtaxed engines. But Captain Morrison stood unmoved at her command station, as solid as the steel that matched her eyes. "Dr. O'Malley," she called over the comm, "begin the fusion drive overload sequence." "Already on it, Captain." O'Malley's voice crackled through static. "I've bypassed the last safety protocols. Core temperature rising. We'll have exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds before critical mass." Aria's holographic form materialized on the bridge, her usual flowing data streams now sharp and angular, matching the crystalline enemies surrounding them. "Captain, I'm prepared to upload my consciousness into their network." "The virus is ready." Morrison nodded, then opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is your captain speaking. In 4 minutes we make history. I want every survivor to fall back to defended positions. Marines, give them hell until the end. It has been," her voice caught for just a moment, "the highest honor of my life to serve with you all." The Krethar fleet had them completely surrounded now, their ships forming a perfect geodesic sphere with the Thermopylae at its center. Their final transmission came through, translated into cold mechanical English. "Your resistance is MATAEMATKALOIF. Util. Accept the perfection of order. Send them our response, Lieutenant Hayes," Morrison ordered with a grim smile. Hayes pressed a single button, broadcasting a clip that engineering had rigged up, the sound of 257 human voices laughing, completely out of sync. The cacophony of genuine human mirth struck the Krethar network like a hammer, their perfect formations wavering as they tried to process the pure chaos of the sound. 3 minutes to core breach, O'Malley reported. "The containment field is already failing. Physics is going to get really interesting really soon." Throughout the ship, the remaining crew took up their final positions. In the corridors, Marine teams led by Chief Santiago fought hand-to-hand against crystalline borders, their battle cries echoing through the decks. In engineering, O'Malley's team worked feverishly to keep the fusion drive stable just long enough to detonate properly. 2 minutes, Araya announced. Captain, I'm detecting a change in their formation. They're attempting to distribute their consciousness across the fleet to protect against the blast. Perfect, Morrison smiled. They're making your job easier. Begin your upload. Araya's avatar flickered, then solidified one last time. It has been an honor, Captain. Humanity's chaos. It taught me to be more than my programming. I hope my final act proves worthy of that lesson. The AI's form dissolved into streams of data, shooting through the ship's communication array and into the Krithar network. Almost immediately, their perfect sphere began to show signs of distortion as Araya's code, carrying the accumulated wisdom of human literature, art, and music, began to infect their unified consciousness. 1 minute, O'Malley's voice was barely audible now over the sound of the dying ship. The core is reaching critical levels. It's beautiful, really. We're about to create something that shouldn't be possible. Morrison took one last look at her bridge crew. Loyal, brave, human to the very end. Lieutenant Rodriguez, shipwide broadcast. One last time. Rodriguez nodded, opening all remaining channels. Morrison straightened her uniform and spoke the words that would be remembered for generations. To Earth, to humanity, and to chaos in all its magnificent forms. We chose this end, freely and without regret. Let history remember that when perfection came to destroy us, humanity responded with glorious disorder. Light it up. Core breach in 10 seconds, O'Malley reported. The laws of physics send their regards. The Thermopila's hull began to glow white-hot as reality itself buckled around the overloading drive. The last thing Morrison saw before the universe turned to fire was the Krithar formation finally, beautifully breaking apart, their perfect geometry shattering under the dual assault of Araya's chaos code and the building wave of nuclear fire. In the last second, someone on the bridge began to laugh. The sound spread, a final chorus of human defiance in the face of cold perfection, cut off only when the fusion drive finally breached, turning the heart of the enemy fleet into a newborn star. 3 days after the Battle of New Eden, the UES Interceptor arrived at the coordinates where the Thermopylae had made her final stand. What they found would change the course of human history forever. Captain Sarah Chen of the Interceptor stood on her bridge, watching the sensor readings with a mixture of awe and reverence. Where the Krithar fleet had been, there was now a vast field of crystalline dust, glittering like scattered diamonds against the void. The explosion had been visible from 3 systems away, a brief, brilliant star born from human sacrifice and determination. "Ma'am," her science officer called out, "you need to see this. The sensor buoys the Thermopylae left behind. They're still transmitting." The data streamed across their screens, detailed readings of the blast, the effect on the Krithar ships, and something else. Something impossible. Within the data packets, they found fragments of code that seemed to dance across their systems, carrying echoes of both Araya's digital consciousness and the Krithar's crystalline network. They didn't just destroy the fleet. The science officer breathed, his eyes wide as he analyzed the readings. They found their weakness. The fusion blast, combined with Araya's code, it didn't just shatter their ships. It shattered their entire neural network. Every Krithar vessel connected to that fleet had their fundamental programming corrupted by chaos itself. In the debris field, recovery teams found other treasures. The Thermopyla's final shuttle, loaded with data cores and personal messages, had been launched moments before detonation. Among the records was Dr. O'Malley's complete documentation of the fusion drive modifications, Araya's analysis of the Krithar consciousness, and Captain Morrison's final log entry. Let it be known, her voice rang clear through the interceptor speakers, that perfection is the enemy of survival. Humanity's greatest strength lies not in our ability to impose order, But in our embrace of chaos, our capacity to adapt, to choose, to sacrifice, we die so that others might live, freely and imperfectly, as all living things should. Word spread quickly through human space. The Thermopyla's sacrifice had not just saved New Eden colony, it had provided humanity with the key to fighting the Krithar. Within weeks, ships were being retrofitted with modified fusion drives. AIs were being programmed with variants of Aria's chaos code. The perfect enemy had finally met its match in humanity's glorious imperfection. 1 month after the battle, on New Eden's largest continent, construction began on a memorial. A massive crystalline structure, ironically built from the remnants of the Krithar fleet, caught the light of the system's star and scattered it in random, beautiful patterns. At its base, they inscribed the names of the Thermopyla's crew, with Captain Morrison's final words etched in letters of gold. But perhaps the most remarkable legacy came from deep within the debris field itself. Recovery teams discovered that the interaction between the fusion blast, Aria's code, and the Krithar network had created something entirely new. Within the crystalline fragments, they found patterns that were neither purely ordered nor purely chaotic, a hybrid consciousness that combined the best of both worlds. The scientists called it organized chaos theory. The philosophers called it evolution. But the people of New Eden called it simply the Morrison effect. The moment when humanity's embrace of imperfection created something perfect in its own way. In the years that followed, the Battle of New Eden became required study at military academies throughout human space. But it wasn't just the tactics they studied. It was the choice, the willing sacrifice of the few to protect the many, the power of human unpredictability against mechanical perfection, the strength found in embracing what others might call weakness. At the New Eden Memorial, there's a small plaque beneath the main inscription. It shows the Thermopyla's final sensor image, one human ship surrounded by a perfect geometric formation of crystalline vessels. Below it are written words that would become humanity's unofficial motto in their continuing expansion across the stars. When the universe demands perfection, answer with beautiful chaos. In the end, the crew of the Thermopyla had proved something fundamental about human nature. It wasn't superior technology or perfect order that made a species great. It was the willingness to imagine impossible solutions, to laugh in the face of certain death, and to choose sacrifice when mathematics said survival was impossible. They had proved, once and for all, that chaos could defeat order, that humanity's greatest weakness was actually its greatest strength, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe is the ability to choose your own end.